Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Demystifying Artificial Intelligence in Learning Technology. My name is Melissa, and I will be kicking things off for us today. Let's get started with some brief introductions. Our presenters today are David Wentworth, who is the Principal Learning Analyst here at Brandon Hall Group, Rich Smith, who is the VP of Sales at Allego, and Craig Simons, Director of Marketing at Allego. Rich is the VP of Sales at Refract, which is an Allego company, and he fell into the profession after leaving university with an underwhelming computer science degree. He has performed all sales roles from lead generation to revenue contributor and now leads a growing team. He's passionate about coaching and developing others, particularly those just starting their career. Craig is the Director of Marketing for Allego, the market leader for virtual learning and enablement in the flow of work. He has 15 years of experience in marketing management with companies such as Blue Cross of Massachusetts, Republic Services, UniFirst, and Carvana, and is a graduate of Goizeta Business School at Emory University in Atlanta. At Allego, Craig oversees demand, operations, and content marketing efforts to ensure the company continually hits its targets and shares capabilities in modern workforce, learning, and performance with the world. Now, I would like to extend a thank you to Allego for sponsoring today's webinar. Allego represents the next era of sales enablement. Their complete rep-centric platform ensures that sellers have the skills, knowledge, and content they need to optimize team success in a virtual world. In place of traditional training and content enablement tactics, which are rapidly outdated and often ineffective, Allego empowers reps with the activated content they need to close deals faster and the personalized coaching and learning they require for continuous improvement. And it all happens in the flow of their daily work, whether it's providing feedback to one another through asynchronous video or enhancing their skills through AI-powered coaching and peer-to-peer collaboration. More than 650,000 professionals are using Allego to revolutionize the way they onboard, train, collaborate, and sell. You can learn more about Allego and the movement they're building at allego.com. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. A quick mention that we have several certification programs currently open for enrollment, including our Certified Learning Strategist program, and you can visit certification.brandonhall.com for more information. Your participation in our surveys is one of the most crucial components of our research. So if you have a few minutes to spare and see any topics on our list that you'd like to take a survey for, it's greatly appreciated. Links will be available in your handout, and you can always visit brandonhall.com for the latest list. All participants do receive a piece of complimentary research once the results have been analyzed. And last but not least, a few logistics. To ask questions during today's presentation, please use the questions panel on your control bar. Chat is enabled today, so feel free to chat with other attendees or our panelists. Today's presentation is being recorded. We will share a link to the recording and a PDF of today's presentation via email in roughly 24 hours. But if you would like to download a copy of today's presentation instantly, I will put it in the chat shortly and make it available for you all to download. And without any further delay, let's dive right in.
Great. Thanks so much, Melissa. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And I do encourage you to take advantage of the chat and the question box. Please, it'd be great to hear any questions or any feedback, any thoughts you might have, share your own experiences. It's just we want to get you involved in the conversation with us today, and don't want it all to be one-sided. So please make sure you're familiar with where those are and use those to talk to us today. Especially since I'm going to try to walk through some very perfunctory basics around AI, at least in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. And, I know that over the past few years, artificial intelligence and other terms have been thrown around quite a bit, pretty freely. Sometimes they mean what they say, other times they're used interchangeably with other terms. And I just wanted to lay down some sort of basic groundwork for what, at least here at Brandon Hall Group, what we think of when we think of these terms and what we mean and how they apply. And then we're going to sort of get into the specifics around learning technology and what it means to them and how to apply those. So For me, I look at it like this. There's these ideas around artificial intelligence is a sort of a large field of technology that is built upon other elements like machine learning and deep learning, right? So these are the things that systems and networks are doing sort of beneath the surface, where they're pulling in data and using that data, running it through algorithms to come up with uh, results and new data. And then, the machine learning takes that deep learning and builds upon it and uses the experience that it has of multiple algorithms to build upon that. And then artificial intelligence is sort of the end product of that, right? The result, the action that takes place as a result. And so from, a learning standpoint, and we'll get into some of these in more specifics coming up, but what we do see is things like the ability to deliver learning recommendations, the ability to personalize learning content, learning experiences, pulling together the right content for the right people, focusing learning and training interventions on specific skills and competencies for people, and of course, coaching and feedback. And we'll talk quite a bit about this today, the ability to leverage these technologies to make the coaching and the feedback experience, that loop, more insightful and more meaningful. And I think it's really important on that because, we did a recent study on learning in the future of work. And one of the things that we asked about from a technology standpoint, we said, what technologies are going to be most important moving forward as we head towards this future of work? What learning technology is going to be most important? And the number one thing was actually coaching and mentoring technology, which we don't often think of coaching and mentoring as a technology solution. But what we're realizing is that organizations know how effective and how important coaching and mentoring is in the learning experience. But the challenge is it's hard to scale. And that's where the technology piece comes in. So companies want to find technology that helps them do a better job of matching people to coaches and mentors, helping identify opportunities for those interactions to take place, making sure that those are much more meaningful when they do happen. So technology is going to be a big driver behind that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But sticking with the basics of what we're talking about, when we talk about artificial intelligence, I mentioned earlier that it's about sort of the execution of all of this data learning that goes on within the system. So I look at it like this. You start with the first step, this idea of augmented intelligence, right? There's this basic step of, I want to get from point A to point B. So if I'm going to call an Uber, if I'm going to use an Uber, that's an example of using augmented intelligence rather than by myself looking for people who are able, I make all these calls to find anybody who's available to take me from here to this other place. Do they know how to get there? When can they do it? Can I schedule it, right? Instead, we're going to use a system that's full of data and intelligence that can connect me with a driver that's close to me, that already knows the route to get there and is going to be able to do it in the time frame that I want. So that experience of the physical ride to this destination still occurs, but we're using this augmented intelligence to do a better job of getting it done. The next sort of step is, okay, what is machine learning then? What is the machine learning element of that? And that to me is the system's just getting smarter and smarter over time. So now I'm going to drive myself to this place, but I'm going to leverage this navigation app that's built on machine learning. It has analyzed tons and tons of data to understand what's the best route, which route is fastest, which one maybe avoids tolls. It can even tell me in real time if there's an accident, if there's a speed trap. It's pulling in all of this data in real time and learning and helping guide me to where I want to go. But I'm still the one that's getting me from point A to point B. Sort of the ultimate expression of all of this is the artificial intelligence. And to me, that's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are often used interchangeably, is that the artificial intelligence represents the execution of all of this. Whereas, so let's say a self-driving car. So now we're taking all of this information that's available from a navigation standpoint. And then we're taking real-time data and information from the actual driving, right? All of this input from the car itself. And it's going to take me from point A to point B. It's going to actually execute on this trip, and I don't actually have to do it. And that's really what, to me, is the difference, the level of artificial intelligence. It's taking all of the things that the systems have learned through machine learning, and then actually executing on that rather than simply making recommendations. So that's sort of my takeaway. And if anybody has any thoughts on that or they would like to share, please feel free. And in fact, before we jump into how this applies to the human capital field, like Craig, if you guys want to just sort of pitch in and just say hi to folks and give your thoughts on sort of that journey to AI.
Yeah, I'll happily jump in. And I think AI is, as we know in the workplace, kind of comes with a lot of typically negative connotations. I think it's probably fair to say a lot of uncertainty and unclarity about how will this impact me in my role. And I think one thing that I've really learned is that as professionals, our lives never stop getting busier. The stuff on the work plate never seems to get lighter, and so how can we leverage this type of technology to actually make us more scalable? How can we use this to not replace humans, but to actually increase the effectiveness of what we do in the workplace, how we help people learn, but also how people can self-learn as well. This is kind of obviously some key things that we'll get into is looking at this not from an angle of wow, the robots are coming to take over, but from a perspective of actually when used effectively, this can help us become more scalable. It can help us free up time for us to focus on things that machines and computers can't do, but ultimately accelerates what we're all trying to achieve, which is the development and improvement of the people that we work with. So yeah, looking forward to diving deeper on those topics.
Yeah, and as we said, to do that, go ahead, Craig, and I was just going to have Melissa bring up the poll, and maybe you could share your thoughts. But we want to get a sense of who's on the call today, so we can maybe tailor some of our thoughts to make sure that we're meeting your needs. So please feel free to answer the response here. Obviously, there could be many more options, but we wanted to limit the number of buttons. So if you're feel free to click that, and you can share that in the chat. What your role is. But Craig, your thoughts as we let people let us know what their role is.
I'm sure the leaders on the call are thinking, well, I'm professional as well, but
we hope
you know what we mean there. No, this is a perfect poll question, because what I was going to say on top of what Rich said is, in this session, we're going to jump into some of the practical applications for learners and for sales teams as well, since that's the business we know best. But a lot of the learning applications, what our customers are using it for, primarily for sales and customer service applications, but really they apply to enhancing any learner's journey and experience as well. And I think it's a really exciting time. We're seeing the front end and the application of a lot of this artificial intelligence really becoming more accessible and practical for businesses to adopt and get immediate value from, without a lot of complicated programming and training required. So I think it's a really timely webinar and an exciting time to be adopting AI technology.
For sure. Yeah, we can take a look at the results here, and we'll just get a sense of who's on the line. So most folks are learning professionals, and again, it's a distinction between professional and leader. I'm sure you all infer what we mean by that, but yeah, most folks are in that learning space. So that's helpful for us. And we do have some sales folks on there too as well. So it's good information for us to have, so we can sort of tailor our thoughts. But again, any questions anybody has please ask the questions in the box, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. And we want to, answer your questions as they come, so you're part of the conversation. But speaking of, so now this shift to artificial intelligence and human capital technology, right? So before we even get into specifics to learning, more of the human capital, we asked in our recent study around technology, human capital technology, how familiar people are in that HCM space with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and how it relates to these human capital technologies. So what's interesting is you look at the weighted averages. It's a 5-point scale of we have no idea what this is, how it relates, or 5, we're very familiar. And so learning is actually at the bottom of that chain, not by a lot. There's not a huge lot of difference between these, but between like, so workforce management, the idea of where do I, put people and time and attendance, those kinds of things. People are a little bit more familiar with how that relates to that technology, how AI relates to that technology than say talent acquisition, finding the right people, hiring them and so forth. Talent management. So that's more of like the performance management areas of human capital. And you can see that. So this is what we see as a natural progression of AI. So you think of things that are relatively transactional, very core HR, time and attendance, rewards recognition, those kinds of things. Where there's more opportunity for automation is where you start to see obviously more familiarity with artificial intelligence. And I think what's interesting though is that we're starting to see how people are accepting more complex interactions can be handled by artificial intelligence as well, and then also allowing those more complex transactions to occur within that AI space. So, overall, the familiarity is not massive here, but I think what I've seen over the last couple of years, at least, is a positive trend that, a couple of years ago, organizations were asking, well, okay, I need to go buy an AI solution. And, because that was there really wasn't an understanding of it. Now their understanding is, okay, AI isn't necessarily its own separate thing. It's something that is built into various technologies that they may or may not be using. And I have to better understand how it powers those technologies rather than trying to find something that I need to, either purchase or find. Then the thing is, we asked,
David, I just want to highlight that point, because I think that's critical, is understanding that AI is not this separate technology that you buy and then try to integrate into your other learning technologies. You can do it that way. It's going to be expensive, and the user experience and the time and money is going to be significant, and the user experience isn't going to be great. It's going to be choppy and not seamless, right? So when you're thinking about AI, you want to make sure that you're choosing solutions where AI is built into your core learning, tech stack. I think that really makes a huge difference in terms of the value that you can drive from it.
Yeah. And, Christina actually makes a good point that aligns with the data that we're looking at right now. She's saying we should be analyzing existing tools to determine how they're using AI, or if. Right. And I think that's a great point. And that sort of speaks to this data we're seeing here. We have then asked, well, what technologies do you use currently that have artificial intelligence or machine learning capabilities? And 10% say, well, none of them. None of the tools we're using have this. Only about 30% say that their L&D technology includes them. Again, it kind of mirrors what we saw as far as the understanding, right? Talent management, talent acquisition, a little bit more transactional. We see more there. But what's interesting is, most companies that you saw on the previous slide, that workforce management, there was a better understanding of how AI fits in with that, yet it's the smallest technology that companies say that they're using that has it. So I think you're right, Christina, that points to that is, I think organizations don't really know. It goes back to that, right? That discussion we were just having, right? Are people aware of what it is, how it works? And then it's like, okay, well, is it already happening in the tools that we have? Are we leveraging it correctly? And I think that's an important discussion to have. The another discussion, I think, and Brian has asked a question, which I think would be great for sort of a discussion near the end. We have a little more time talking about humans' role in AI. And I think we definitely want to get into that. So Brian, it's not us ignoring your question. I just think it's a more discussion type that I want to save some room for. So hang on there. So just overall, now we've gone sort of like AI in general, we've gone AI for human capital technologies. Now we're focusing a little bit more specifically on learning technologies. And we asked companies, how important is the application of AI into these tools as it relates to learning technology? And you can see here the 4s and the 5s, right? The very important, critically important. You're talking 60% of organizations say that these technologies are that important to their learning technology tools. So there's an interesting convergence of a better understanding of these tools, what they do, and a recognition of their importance and how and what they can do and how they work. So I think what we're seeing is a very interesting convergence of what people are looking for when it comes to these technologies. And sort of the last piece of sort of level setting that I want to share here from the data standpoint is, we saw earlier, we asked companies, what HCM technologies are you using that leverage these tools? Now we're asking specifically, what learning technologies do you currently have that leverage these? And, the companies, 57% of companies now that say they have an LMS say it leverages AI and ML. If you keep in mind that probably anywhere from 85 to 90% of organizations have at least one LMS in-house, only 57% say that their LMS leverages these capabilities. And then you can see also a learning experience platform, only 40% say that it leverages that technology. And then 20% an adaptive learning platform, which again speaks to sort of the understanding of these, because an adaptive learning platform really is driven mostly by machine learning and artificial intelligence. So chances are, if you have some sort of solution that is adaptive learning, it's being driven by these tools, but it shows that organizations don't yet understand what's under the hood in these tools. And again, I think what you'll find from the three of us talking today is it's not so much that you need to go out and become an artificial intelligence scientist, but if you get a better understanding of how it works and what it does, you're in a much better position to leverage it properly and feed it the right information so that you're getting the best results. So I think that's a really important piece. So as we sort of switch gears into talking about how we leverage this, what it looks like in a real place, I'm going to pull up, there's another, Spria makes a good point here too. It has to deal with the democratization of information, right? Sometimes the information is there, but those that have it don't share. And you're right, that's another great way to leverage something like artificial intelligence to find all of these sources of information and be able to share those in a much more scalable and automated way. But yeah, that I think that's really the key. So I think, obviously Craig and Rich are going to talk a little bit more about specifically how we use it in technology. But to set that up, because we're going to talk about something specific, I wanted to share another piece of information that we've gotten from our research, because this is really what's going to a great example of how AI can drive a technology solution. In our studies, we found that companies that say that their learning programs, their approach to learning, is having a strong impact on a series of outcomes like employee engagement, individual performance, time to productivity. Those are those high impact companies where learning is having that impact. They are much more likely to offer methods to reinforce learning concepts, as well as opportunities to practice and apply knowledge. We find they're much more likely to do that than companies where they say it's not having that kind of impact. So being able to do that, being able to provide these reinforcement opportunities and this ability to practice and apply becomes very critical. So then the extrapolation there is, by leveraging artificial intelligence, we can do a better job of creating those opportunities. And Craig and Richard are going to talk a little bit about how that's done. But before we get in there, I think I want to just, going back to the conversation we were having, guys, about where people are and doing that sort of assessment of your own organization. Let us know what you think is going on in your company, right? Are you currently leveraging artificial intelligence in any of your learning technologies? And maybe for sure you're not. Nope. Or maybe, I don't think so. Or maybe you're leaning towards maybe you are. And of course, yes, you're very aware that they are. If you have any other thoughts, you can also share that in the chat if you like. But as we set this up and start the polling, any other sort of thoughts from that those last bits of data slides there?
Excited to jump into some of the applications of this technology and share what we can. I think the questions and the dialogue in the chat is great so far. People are asking the right questions and thinking about this the right way. A lot of platforms have some AI and machine learning built in through partner relationship. For example, like your website or most LMSs will have some kind of search feature, right? And if that has type ahead or predictive search, so when you start typing in something and then it kind of finishes your search for you, that's probably machine learning happening in the background, but it might not be native to that LMS. That LMS might be partnering with Google or another search technology, but you are using some AI right there in that type of a use case. Now, that's probably one of the more common use cases. There's other much more cutting edge and more exciting use cases for the technology as well.
All right, let's share the results, and we'll then jump into more specifically the application of AI in learning technologies. A pretty wide spread of results here, guys. I mean, yeah, all over the map. Although, we got 32% say maybe, and 30% saying definitely yes. So it leans a little bit towards yes, which I would imagine to be the case. Does that surprise you?
Not for me. No, I think there's obviously a lot of uncertainty about whether people have this technology already, which again is not. It kind of speaks to some of the comments, but perhaps what may still, regardless of whether we know it's being used or whether it may be being used, is maybe hopefully we can bring some clarity to data, some real life applications, and how it impacts the learners. So
yeah. So all right, let's close that, and let's talk about that a little bit, about how we can specifically start to see where AI can be leveraged within a learning environment.
Yeah, this is a little nifty graphic we just put together for this webinar to showcase all the ways that our platform, Allego, leverages artificial intelligence for learning. And we're going to go over most of these. So you don't have to write all these down. We're gonna cover most of these, some a little deeper than others. But you can get a feel for the different applications here, right? AI-powered search, which is what I just was mentioning. AI-driven learning and reinforcement. We're going to dive into that, which is basically getting custom reinforcement and quizzes based on your strengths and weaknesses and your knowledge assessment. Feedback and alerts. This is highly programmable to your specific business, but being able to set up those workflows and automations so that people are getting the information in the flow of their work. Highlight reels. This is really fun technology that we're going to get into that helps you keep your pulse on really what's happening in your business, all those customer and prospect conversations. Virtual coaching, we'll dive into that. That is really talking about helping to scale and understand team-wide performance so that you can optimize and really change behaviors most efficiently. No organizations ever have enough time for coaching. So technology can't give you more time, but it can help you use that time most efficiently. Content recommendations is great, and this is where integration of AI with a content platform and with an LMS is so critical, so that it can understand where you need information and then it can serve that content up to you. And AI-powered tagging is one of the ways that it's able to do that by letting the AI understand what content is about. It's able to surface that content to the people that need it and when they need it. So these are some of the applications. Did I miss anything, Rich?
No, I think you pretty much got it.
Okay, awesome.
So yeah, so let's kind of just go into some real life applications. One of the biggest applications we're seeing AI within the training and learning space is assisting with practice. It's funny because practice is often one of those forgotten about but highly effective methods of helping to get people effective before they go into executing in their actual role. So that could be anything from customer service, sales. It could even be when you think about how you're developing managers and leadership. Highly practical professions where there's a lot of communication scenarios that people will find themselves in. The thing is, we practice so much in our personal lives. If you think of any sort of discipline that you probably care about outside of work, whether that's a sport or a hobby or whatever that may be, you practice a lot, but don't actually see practice actually take place as much as it should do in the work environments. And one of the big drawbacks that we see as to the reason why it doesn't happen is down to scalability. We've had lots of examples of where customers had previously done things like practice sessions where they'd fly an entire team of people into one location to a specific physical location. It would take an enormous amount of time of the team out of their day, taking those people out of the field, not to mention the expense of actually getting them into essentially a classroom setting to basically practice dealing with certain scenarios. Now what we're kind of seeing is the move towards actually making that using AI to get reps to practice, for example, presentations or dealing with a certain situation that they might find themselves up against, but using AI to actually analyze kind of how they actually performed in that kind of pitch setting. So that could be everything from, hey, we want our customer service representatives to use this specific language when they're dealing with a certain difficult scenario with a customer. We also want them to avoid this scenario, and being able to essentially automatically grade how someone executes in those practice settings without the human manual intervention of having to review them, those responses themselves. Craig, I'm not sure anything to add on to that.
Yeah, the power of self-evaluation, I think, is very underrated. Sales coaches are great, or sorry, any coaches is great, and they're trained to give feedback and help people improve. But in my experience, the best feedback, and when I watch myself on film, I notice everything that I'm doing wrong, and it's uncomfortable. But I think the power of self-evaluation is huge, and people really can be their best coaches. Leveraging a practice environment like this is also like they say, don't practice on your customers. That's very true, and this also enables peer-to-peer feedback, right? So if we're thinking of how we can help scale our coaching and reduce the coaching burden, right? Being able to record yourself and then share that with a group of your peers, they're going to learn from you, and you're going to learn from each other, as well as what the AI is offering up, right? You're going to understand your pace. Everyone has these tics or these things that they do when they get nervous, the use of filler words, some things that you might not even be aware of in watching it. The AI can recognize that and surface that up. The AI isn't perfect. It's not great yet at detecting emotions. It's not great at understanding the complete context, but it is getting better at that. It's getting better and better at that. But things like, did you hit this topic? Did you hit that topic? Did you bring this up too early? That type of feedback, the AI is very good at, understanding your speaking time. Are you speaking too much? Are you speaking too fast? Those type of tips you might not even get by rewatching yourself. But when the AI throws that suggestion at you, you're like, okay, yeah, they're right. That's interesting.
Right. But if we were to skip on, but staying on the topic of practice, how do you start to make practice even more realistic, right? It's the classic thing of how can we start to move towards the realms of making as real life as possible. So in this case, how do you take yourself out the realms of recording maybe a pitch or a presentation or an upcoming difficult conversation to get that self-evaluation or peer-to-peer feedback that Craig mentioned, and into an environment whereby it feels like you're practicing with a real human? And this is where we can introduce dialogue simulators. Put another way, you can practice these real scenarios with an artificial human, whereby the action that you decide to take dictates what the artificial human responds with. And we see just enormously different applications of this in different verticals or settings. For example, it could be a salesperson having a conversation with a prospect on a first call. Or it could be, again, using the customer service example, a customer service agent dealing with an angry customer who's called in. And what you have here is that the concept of whatever the learner, the action that they decide to take, really dictates what the artificial human will say next. It kind of is almost like a choose your own adventure style approach, but is supposed to replicate a real life human interaction. Again, the key here is that it's leveraging AI to make training more scalable than the alternative human-driven approach, as well as making this more repeatable. But not to mention the enormous benefits of a learner practicing as many times as they want to until they build up that confidence level, they build up that muscle memory in a way that it just becomes difficult to practice with a human again and again and again, maybe to the amount of times that we desire to get to that level of comfort. So yeah, this is where we're starting to really see this technology get even more exciting, where you're replicating practice scenarios with real humans, but in an artificial sense.
Yeah, I love the scale. This is scalable role plays, right? And to your point, the repeatability is big, because if you're doing role plays, with human, one that's resource intensive, right? Because you need a coach or someone to do that role play with each person. And then are they going to be consistent, right, in terms of how they respond to different conversation approaches? So having consistency and being able to evaluate your team across a consistent rubric is big. And my favorite thing about practice like this is that reps will end up practicing 6 times more than if they just did a human role play, right? Because of the quest for perfection, right? And if you make this a submission that they need to submit to their manager their finished practice, and you basically like, this is my best pitch, then they will record themselves 6 times because they want to get it perfect. And if they do that role play once in a live interaction, they probably don't do it a second time. They're going to say, yep, that was good enough. So it really changes the psychology and the amount of practice they get done.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post this morning about this topic, Craig, where if you think about practice in your personal life, like obviously British terminology here, but we use keepy ups with a football or a soccer ball, where you practice how many times you can keep kicking the ball up by yourself. And what happens when you mess up? You pick the ball up and you try again, and you try again and again and again until you beat your score. And that's because as humans, we're determined to practice till we try and get better, improve, look for that perfection. But we just don't get that same. We don't get that same chance when you're dealing with humans, where you may only get the chance to practice once before the human, the trainer, the coach has to move on and work with somebody else or move on to the next thing on their plate. So yeah, totally. Again, shows why the key around practice and why we need to make practice more similar to the workplace as we do in our personal lives.
Yeah.
A couple questions already. Like, how do you do this? Like, does it require a lot of effort to set up? I know in Allego, we've tried to make it as easy as possible with it's really just like a spreadsheet with decision tree. So, there's no programming, there's no coding. We've tried to make it really simple. And you can create different templates that different people can access and use for different types of trainings.
Yeah. But everything that we've talked about there is centered around practice, or let's say artificial scenarios. When, as we know, what really counts is what happens in reality. That is really what it counts for. You could practice as many shots at the driving range as you like till you feel super confident, but when you walk onto the golf course, when you're up in the competition, that's what really counts, right? In other words, I can practice all I want with an artificial human, a bot, but what happens when I'm in front of a real customer or prospect? And this is where the AI starts to get even more exciting, in the sense that we can start to drive automated coaching based on real conversations, real recorded conversations. For example, these could be sales calls or customer service calls or account management calls. And what the AI can do is analyze patterns and trends in those conversations. It could be doing everything from identifying undesirable language that was used in the conversation through to recommending personalized learning based on certain topics that came up in my call. For example, imagine as a coach, or a trainer, if I could be alerted to any time my sales team talks about a specific product that we've just launched. I want to identify, when is that happening? How often is it happening? But crucially, how are we actually communicating that message to our audience? Are we doing what we practice doing in the practice scenarios? On the other side of the coin, you can also use this AI generated analysis to understand trends across an entire team. For example, what do your top performers spend more time talking about in their customer conversations than the people who are less successful? Or hey, when we talk about these products, or even when we use these pain points, or when we use these value propositions, does that correlate to won deals or higher satisfaction or whatever that metric is that you're tracking? Again, AI is analyzing this data on a massive scale, but allowing people to get the insight and data faster, more accurately, so that they can then use that information to make important decisions, for example, based on learning interventions, training, or coaching.
Yeah, I love the team-wide behavior piece, because there's always these group coaching sessions, and this really lets you focus on the areas for improvement that are going to have the broadest and largest impact. So it obviously helps those individual coaching sessions, but it also helps those group coaching sessions as well.
I just want to quickly, just before you jump in, Craig, just respond to George's question around, is there a role for a facilitator in this AI practice? Just any self-directed? Where's the human feedback and human relationship built? Yeah, great question, George. What we see is that, again, I come back to timing and the issue. If we take coaching as an example, we know that 3/4 of sales leaders will say that coaching is the most important function of their role. Yet the stark reality is that the average sales manager invests something like less than 5% of their actual time coaching their team. There's a massive disconnect between what people are saying is super important to what is actually playing out in reality. And if you ask them why are they dedicating so little time, it's because of capacity, bandwidth, or being pulled in different directions. So what we see is that the AI will actually help to direct leaders and managers to hone in on the most appropriate, highest impact coaching areas. For example, hey, we've identified this person really struggles with this area. We just want to focus on that area. Or, hey, we understand that this person really struggles talking about X with customers. We can give them that data and allows them to basically make more data-driven coaching, essentially, and essentially making more use of their time. So that's where we're actually seeing the impact on a human level, is that it's actually making the coaching interactions much more focused, much more relevant, much more timely.
Yeah, and I think that response speaks to one of the questions that came in too about, what extent the one-on-one virtual simulations reflect real life. In a face-to-face setting, the learner doesn't get 3 answer options to choose from, right? And I think exactly, and I all these questions start to come around. Even the question that came in earlier that we were going to address later, come in around this: where is the human interaction, right? What level does that come in at? And that's really dependent on the situation. But as far as that question goes, to me, this isn't a replacement, right? This is more, how do we get to a point where that face-to-face is going to be as meaningful and as impactful as possible, so that when you have people together, you're not spending all the time talking about how many times they said or like. We've sort of addressed that already. We're more focused on more strategic, bigger issues when we actually have those face-to-face. I liken it to me as a musician trying to play in a band to learn a song. I should rehearse the song a bunch at home by myself to learn it. I don't show up to rehearsal with the rest of the band on the first day and try to learn the song then, because now I'm wasting my time as well as everybody else's. So it's the idea of, at what stage do we get to where we can use these tools to get people to a point where the personal interactions that they are having are much more meaningful and effective. I mean, that's just my take on it. You guys can take that in any direction you want.
I think that's right. And, to address that question, looks like it was anonymous, around how much does it reflect real life? I don't get 3 answer options in front of me in real life. It's a good point so the CI and the AI is actually going to do its best to understand what you're saying and automatically move the conversation forward. So it actually does feel very much like a real life conversation. It's when the AI cannot figure out the context of what you're saying and know which path to go down that it will cue you to actually choose the path. So it doesn't want to choose wrong. It's giving you the option to choose the correct path, but that's only when the AI isn't aware of the context of what you're saying. So I wanted to call that out. And then the other piece of the AI is a lot of the AI technology is around the visuals that you're seeing, because it's able to understand the words that you're going to say and move the lips accordingly. And I don't know if other people feel this way, but when the lips are weird and I just hear like a voice and it doesn't sound natural, it's very distracting to me. This technology has gotten to a place where it feels like you're talking to a person, which is pretty incredible from the learner experience. It really does feel like you're talking to a person. So that, to me, that's kind of like an evolution in this technology.
You guys want to move on to auto tagging?
Well, let's talk about showreels real quick.
Yep.
This is a fantastic AI technology, really driven by conversation intelligence, that basically lets you scan your universe of conversation data, whether that's conversations with prospects, whether that's customer service calls, whether they're practice sessions, and you can filter basically the bank of conversations that you want it to search. And you can search for a specific topic, maybe a competitor, maybe a common challenge or objection that your customers or prospects surface that your team needs to respond to. Could be a new product feature or a product name. So you can put that in there, and what it's going to do is basically give you like the SportsCenter top 10 or worst 10, the not top 10. It's going to give you basically a menu snippets. They can be 30-second. You can make them shorter or longer. And you just get to watch the highlight reel of your team talking about that topic. There is no better way to keep your finger on the pulse of the conversations happening at your business, not only for coaching opportunities, but also for messaging optimization. And also, related to messaging optimization, understanding the voice of the customer and the voice of the prospect. Understanding what messaging elicits emotion, a response, energy on the other side of the meeting, right? And then what language is the customer or the prospect using when they respond, right? That data is so important so that we're speaking the right language and resonating and ultimately driving the right outcomes from our conversations.
Yeah, and then just on content, this is really speaking to what Craig mentioned at the start about how do you make it easy for learners to actually get access to the content they need in their moment of need. What we typically hear a lot of is that a lot of companies have an enormous amount of learning content that exists, but the challenge that a lot of learners have is how do they get access to what they need when they need it. And they tend to spend more time searching for this content than actually making use of it. And it almost becomes a detractor to learning. So, some of the things that we see where AI comes in here is being able to tag content and recommend content, much like consumer products like YouTube that we use, where we go onto YouTube and YouTube is like intelligently identifies videos that we've watched historically and starts to recommend videos that it thinks that we might like. Or we go into Netflix and Netflix will recommend shows or movies based on previous content that we've watched. The exact same concept applies here with learning content. Hey, we've seen that you've watched a lot of content surfaced around these areas. We believe that you may also find this content valuable. But it's not just personalizing the content based on what you've consumed before or what you have a greater interest in, but is also serving that up to you at the right time. So in a sales setting, this could be looking at, hey, we've identified that you're working on this deal where you're selling to this type of customer in this industry, and you're at this stage of the sales cycle. This is the content that we recommend that you leverage, or the learning content that we recommend you consume, because this is going to help you for where you are right now in your journey. And it kind of moves this old approach from learning to, hey, you get a new person on board of the business, you kind of give them a load of this content that learning content that they work their way through one time only, and that they good chances they forget about that stuff or they don't revisit that content. Some of that content might be really valuable. How can you actually make sure that content is given to the learner in their flow of work, in their moment of need? And they are more likely to adopt that content when they know it's personalized, when it's recommended, and when it's specific to what they need at that moment in time.
AI-driven learning and reinforcement. This is really new. However, I know that adoption of this is still relatively low in LMS platforms, and I think one of the places where a lot of traditional LMSs are falling down is having the custom personalized reinforcement to make sure that the learning is transferred from that short-term memory in our area of our brain to the long-term memory. And that takes repetition. It takes episodic repetition. And it's much more effective when it's not one size fits all. And if you can kind of click through some of these slides, you can see that they're going to get a push notification on their phone. If you're using Allego, it's going to offer you sort of these flash drills, as we call them. And the content that in the questions that it's asking is based on where your gaps are. It's gonna make sure that it's hitting those areas where you need the most reinforcement and not making you answer questions that you already know cold, right? Because reinforcement like this, it is interruptive and you don't want to be wasting time. You want to make sure that you're most efficient, right? Your learning time needs to be efficient and effective. So having customized learning paths based on your specific strengths and weaknesses is one of the ways that you can achieve that and see ultimately better performance across your entire team, knowing that each person is getting an individual learning path and reinforcement path for them. I think there's a couple more slides that just show, right? So once you answer it, then it's going to give you a little bit of information about that answer, whether you got it right or wrong. And then of course, the scoring and the gamification element. You can understand how you're doing. So managers can come in and quickly see how people are doing on these tests. So you have the analytics in the back end, little detail of how Allego works. All right, and then in terms of this graphic, what you're seeing here is basically what the Allego content library looks like. And I just want to talk about the way that AI helps surface or helps you then go find content, right? The idea of push versus pull. Rich already talked about the content recommendations that the AI can provide, either by putting it into your recommendation feed or sending you an email with content. Or a pop-up that's going to suggest learning content right after a conversation as part of our conversation intelligence. It's also very important that users are able to then go find content, right? And there's a lot of science and psychology behind the way humans like to browse for content. YouTube and Netflix and Amazon have become very, very good at creating UIs that people intuitively allows them to find what they're looking for quickly. And there's AI driving a lot of that, right? So which content is recommended, which order it's in. It's using like lookalike algorithms to understand what people in your role and your experience or with your responsibilities are also consuming and which ones they're finding interesting and making recommendations based on that. It's also very browsable. So you're gonna have a content hierarchy and this is where auto tagging comes in. Organizations that are leveraging agile content, those quick little reports that you can capture from the field with institutional knowledge, baking that into your learning curriculum, into your onboarding is so very valuable. People love learning from their peers, and the latest and greatest insights are coming from the field, right? It's pretty hard for you to bake into your onboarding a 45-minute formal course of a new product feature that released last month, right? But being able to get quick wins and examples of your peers talking about that product and then taking that snippet and putting that into onboarding, that's much more doable, right? And making sure that those snippets are all tagged appropriately. So when someone searches for something, the right content is coming up for them, right? So having this just-in-time library that makes it very intuitive for learners to find what they need is a game changer, because now you don't have to stuff everything into your formal learning programs and into your onboarding. You can move towards a just-in-time approach instead of a just-in-case approach.
we're here at the sort of just at some of the takeaways, and we talk about this, but there were some great questions come in, so we want to get to those. But essentially, we're going to see more and more of this, right? Machine learning and artificial intelligence playing a bigger and bigger role in not just learning technologies, but all technologies, obviously. But the whole point of what we're talking about here is using it, leveraging it to help reduce the burden that coaches and sellers feel. And that helps expand that scale and speed. That's really what it's all about. Trying to, offload some of the more transactional, minute things that get in the way of doing the more strategic things for coaches, mentors, trainers, instructors, and so forth. So the idea is to make humans more effective and efficient, but not necessarily replace them, right? I think this is the point, is to allow the human interaction that does occur to be more strategic and more meaningful. And but for all this to work, we talked about these specific use cases, but in any of the other type of use cases, the bottom line is AI only works based on the data that it has, right? So, and that idea of machine learning, the machines only learn what we give them, and that comes over time. And it comes from having the right information. So if we start to use more and more of these tools, it's really important that you have a strong data strategy to understand that our data is sound, it's good, and we know what data we need and what it means, so we can start feeding it to the right places. So that's obviously another complete discussion around data, but it's an important one to remember as we get into AI and machine learning. So from there, I think it's important that we hit on some of the questions that came in. I don't know, I think Rich or Craig, you might have marked some that you saw that you wanted to respond to.
It's been so much great interaction in the chat and the questions. Thank you to everybody for these really, really good stuff.
I'll answer a couple on the Q&A. So Jason says, if you're not using AI right now, I do not believe this is automatically built into our current L&D tools. What actions items would say should be next steps? Any quick wins we can shoot for? I think for me, like what I would go with that is understanding like what is the objective that you're looking to solve is always key. I think you can, anybody can go out and buy, new technology, AI technology, because it looks cool, but what's actually the problem that you're looking to solve is I'd always start there. And if things like making, could be as simple as, hey, we just want to increase the amount of self-learning, self-practice that people have, that our learners have, then there's obviously some great applications that we've shown to do that. And the good news is that for a lot of these things, it's not complex to get a lot of these things set up and off the ground. It's they're designed to actually take a lot of the grunt work out of things. So I'd say, like, always just ask yourself, what's the problem? Like, what's the skill that we're looking to improve? What's the thing that we're looking to help our learners achieve? And that would help to answer your question. Megan's asked, can Allego integrate with an existing LMS? What types of integrations? What does that look like? Megan, we can obviously take that offline and talk to it in a bit more detail. But in summary, yes, we often are leveraged alongside more traditional learner management systems. Our system can pull in SCORM courses from other learning management systems. We can push and pull data to and from systems. For example, reporting information where their existing LMS doesn't necessarily deliver the kind of the level of functionality of what they're looking for, particularly when we talk about things like simulators, etc.
You brought up specific use cases, and one of the questions that I know you sort of answered it in the chat though, but Kate was asking about what software can be used to get the data and apply it to existing systems, or to like something like customer phone calls. Is that something like where conversation intelligence could be applied to actual customer phone calls as well, as part of a, always see that when you call, and this call may be monitored, maybe it's being monitored by AI?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing there is we're taking recordings of real conversations like recordings that many companies actually already have today. The problem is those recordings often sit there and collect dust, or they just don't have the capacity to be able to understand at a deep level what's actually going on in those conversations. And ultimately, our technology plugs into existing systems and phone systems, video platforms, to basically take those recordings and start to give companies intelligence into those conversations, but also do a lot of the automated learning and coaching recommendations as we've talked about. So yeah, that's a very common use case in our conversation intelligence module.
Mm-hmm. An interesting question from Jean earlier about adapting it to multicultural groups. And I think, my first response to that is, the parameters still apply. It's about what are the inputs that you want. So for the idea of this conversation intelligence, we mentioned, keywords. And so based on different languages, you would still identify what those keywords would be in that language to see if those are arriving. Also, speed of speech, right? Words per minute. The parameters might be different based on the language that's being spoken. So it's just a question of baking that in from the front end. But I mean, essentially, the tool doesn't care, right? It's really about what you're putting in. So if it is, you've got a global organization with multiple different geographies and different cultures, it's about baking the parameters into the tool, which you can clearly do, right, guys?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I think a good one to end on. We're a minute over, and I know people are jumping off, but I just want to make sure we get to folks. Is this last one that came in the Q&A, leveraging AI to produce insightful data and analytics for LMS content and activity. I mean, that's something that you guys are pretty familiar with. I think you touched a little bit on it in the content piece that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. The content's a great example of that. Is, hey, how can people who are actually creating this great learning content, training content, how can we first of all make sure that the right people see that content in their moment of need, versus us, we dedicate all this time and effort creating this content, but it, gets looked at once a year by each individual or never at all. But also we can start to identify, things like which content is getting the highest adoption by the workforce, which content is impacting things like win rates in our sales team, for example. So yeah, there's lots of great data which can be leveraged by the content creators to inform what they should create more of, what they should create less of. And that's a big use case of people who are using our platform.
Yeah, great. I appreciate you touching on all of those. So obviously, Rich and Craig, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know there's, obviously artificial intelligence is a much bigger concept than we can cover in just 60 minutes here, but I'm glad we were trying to at least knock some of the dirt off the surface and get in there a little bit and get a better understanding of how to use it. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences on that. And of course, thanks to Allego for providing us with the time today. So, and thanks for, the interaction's been great. Thank you for all the comments and questions. Been really great. Thank you.
Thanks. This was fun.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.